Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. I recently saw someone do this experiment where they drew a self-portrait of themselves in the way that they feel like they look, and then they drew a second self-portrait using a reference photo. This sounded like a fun experiment, and since I'm also trying to develop my portrait skills right now, I decided to go ahead and give it a try. The first self-portrait I made is the one that's based on the way that I feel that I look. I decided to do this one as an illustration, kind of a caricature type artwork, which is actually quite a bit out of my comfort zone. So not only was this a challenge for me just to draw myself as someone that's trying to learn portraits and trying to be accurate, but also I'm drawing in a style that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm also going to use watercolor paints, which I haven't used in years. So I didn't really set myself up for success on this one, but of course it's important to try and challenge ourselves in order to grow our skills. As you might notice as you're watching me sketch this, I'm erasing a lot and redrawing a lot. Specifically, I had a lot of problems with my nose, mouth, and chin. I'm not sure why I had a lot of problems with my chin, but I know that my nose is something that really stands out to people, so I wanted to be sure to try and get it right. So after getting a sketch down of my face that I feel like actually does kind of resemble my face, at least a little bit, I decided to add in a few items that hint at my personality more. So I added in my cat, Mitty, named after The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, a to-go cup which is full of matcha because I drink that every single day, and then a pencil behind my ear because art has really become a big part of my life. Okay, so at this point, I don't know what happened, but apparently I didn't record most of this process. So we're skipping the watercolor part and we're going straight to adding in some details with a few different things. At first I tried using these Prismacolor art sticks, and I did a few different things with these, like coloring in some of the hair and adding some purple shadows. But I had a hard time using these. I feel like they weren't quite soft enough for what I was trying to do. Then I went in with one of my black liner pens from Molotow, I think is how you pronounce the name. And I just used this for the pupils and then a few other spots that I feel like it needed it. But I ended up not using it as much as I had originally planned. The plan was to completely outline this in ink, but I didn't expect to be able to get my watercolors this deep, since the previous times that I've used them I hadn't been able to do that. But hopefully that's a sign that I've gotten a little better at color mixing then. So here I'm just trying to add a few extra details with my Crayola colored pencils, since I decided not to do a full outline in pen. But everything I did with those was very subtle. And now time for the best part, adding highlights. I first tried to use this white marker pen because I thought that'd be the best way to go about doing this, but it turns out that thing didn't work. So then I just grabbed my gouache and used a brush to add a few highlights. Just look at that difference that adding a highlight in the eyes made. And then here I am adding highlights to my hair, which I got really carried away with. I probably did not need all of this, but I guess it's an interesting style choice, you could say. Hair is something that is really difficult for me to draw, let alone try and paint in watercolor, so the fact that it even came out looking this decent is fine by me. So now I'm going to get started on my second self-portrait, and this one I am using a reference photo for. I'm going to try and draw it as faithfully to what I actually look like as I can, but you'll see in the end that there are a few things that I got a little bit wrong that I'm pretty unhappy with, but that's okay. While making these self-portraits, I couldn't help but think about the way that we perceive ourselves. It's really interesting that we never really see ourselves for how we actually are. The only way that we really see ourselves is through mirrors, what people say, and pictures. These are all lenses that kind of distort reality. But I guess there really isn't a way to see ourselves just very objectively, without any kind of filters. I find that interesting just because of how much our appearance actually affects our day-to-day life. People very easily make judgments based on your appearance, and we honestly make pretty harsh judgments about our own appearance as well. So the fact that we can't see ourselves the way other people might see us, or without any kind of biasness, is kind of a fascinating thing to think about. Another thing that I was thinking about is the discrepancy between how we feel we're supposed to look and how an artist might view a person. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of pressure for us to look perfect or flawless or to appear a certain way. But I'm sure a lot of artists like me would agree that a face that's full of supposed flaws is way more interesting. A crooked nose and smile expresses a lot more character. A lot of us want our art to be something that you can connect with emotionally. I find that art that isn't about capturing something that is perfect and flawless is more captivating because it's more like reality. So while I was making these self-portraits, I did try to focus on things that I consider prominent features and even flaws, but I tried not to think of them negatively. I've seen quite a few artists who take things that are considered flaws in society, like stretch marks, and turn them into art. I just think it's really great that artists can take something that typically someone considers a flaw about themselves and turn it into something beautiful, turn it into art. Alright, so now we've hit the ugly part in the painting process, but we're getting there. Something that I found to be very difficult about watercolors is trying to figure out how much water I should be using. I ended up doing a lot of thin layers on this when I probably should have just used less water and gone in with more pigment. It felt like I was putting a lot of paint down and that it was turning very saturated, but once it dried, it really lightened up a lot. The reason I was using so much water though was because I was trying to keep it from drying before I finished putting all of the paint down. I was trying to prevent the streakiness that tends to occur with watercolor. But the reason that might have been happening is because I wasn't using watercolor paper. So I ended up giving myself a little bit of a smaller chin than I actually have on accident, and then also my nose looks like it's been flattened. And I think that got worse as I added the paint down. I think the sketch was a little more accurate, but it's a learning process. So now I'm just going in with the gouache highlights. I just used straight up white for some reason. I didn't mix any kind of colors to make a better highlight, but I just added a whole bunch of white streaks everywhere. Then I went in with my black liner pen again to do some of the darker parts like the pupils. And those are my finished self-portraits. Here's the reference photo I used. You can tell that the angle of the head really tricked me up and I had a difficult time with that. But overall, this was a super fun experiment. I really enjoyed doing these self-portraits and getting back into watercolor again. If you happen to have any tips about watercolor, please leave them in the comments for me. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe for more.